Bright Duty. Every student matters.
Hello guys, welcome back to the history class. Now in this chapter we are going to look at your chapter 6 from the book. Okay, chapter 6 from your book, and the title of this chapter is Central Islamic Lands, and the period of this particular study is from 7th to 12th century. Okay, so basically from 600 to 1100 AD. Okay. All right. So in the last class, we learned about the Roman Empire. Now, in the last class, we also learned a little bit about when the Roman Empire flourished. In its adjacent area, there were Arab or there were a Muslim empire, Islamic empire that was also gaining power. All right, so that part of area, that adjacent area that we briefly mentioned in the last class is what we are going to focus. All right, so let us begin. Now the Arabs, all right, so we look at the Arabs. We looked at the Romans, now we look at the Arabs. Now the Arabs, they lived in a large peninsular area. Okay, and this area, most of this peninsular area was a desert. Okay, was dry land, and there was a sea on one of its sides. Okay, and that sea is called the Red Sea. So the land along that sea, okay, so the Red Sea coast, that land was fertile. Okay, and it acted as a very important part of the empire because the seaports were set up in that coastal areas from where trade took place. All right. Now, it was in this region only, the Red Sea coastal area, that two of the sacred towns, holy towns of the Muslims, that are Mecca and Medina, they were situated. Okay, so the coastal areas were very important for the Arabs. All right. Now, as we look into the Islamic period, as we look at this Islamic empire that grows and that is set up in this area, okay, in this desert area, peninsular area. All right, along the Red Sea. Now we also have to read and learn about Islam, the religion. Okay, Islam. We know Muslims, right? We have Muslim friends. We know Muslims. Now, Muslims, their faith is Islamic faith. Islam is what they believe in, what they practice. Okay. Now, the birth and the spread of Islam, just like the birth and spread of Christianity in the Roman Empire, similarly, the birth and spread of Islam is one of the most important events that took place in the history of the world, and this took place in the area that we are going to learn in this chapter. Okay, now Islam was born in the 6th century AD. All right, it was born in Arabia, that peninsula that we are talking about. Its name was Arabia, and within just about 100 years, or 1 century, this religion spread to northern parts of Africa, in Iran, Afghanistan, also in some parts of China. All right. In India, Southeast Asia, Islam spread later. Okay, first it spread to North Africa, Iran, Afghanistan, and even parts of China. Then it spread to India and Southeast Asia. Okay, today there are above 1 billion Muslims who live in different parts of the world. Okay. Now, the process by which these Muslims, okay, who follow Islam, who practice Islamic rituals, who believe in their leader, right, Prophet Muhammad. So all of these Muslims, how they were converted, how they came in contact with Islam, how did they accept this faith. Okay, now that took place depending on various circumstances. Okay, circumstances that they had to face, or that they came across, or that they experienced. Okay, so the kind of conversion that might have taken place in Southeast Asia is different from that in China. The kind of experiences that people in, say, for example, Spain faced as to how they accepted Islam, or how Islam was spread there, that was different. Okay, so although Islam spread to different corners of the world, but how it was spread, how it was accepted by people, how people converted to accept this new faith from their old faith, so that is different for different regions and different parts of the world. So that is what we are going to learn in this chapter. Okay, how it began, the religious faith, how it was spread, and how it continued to spread. All right. Now, before we go on to study the progress of this religion, before we go on to see how it began and how the spread of this religion also began, we have to remember the period of the birth of Islam and its spread is from 7th to 12th centuries, and along with that we have to also read and learn about the life and teachings of the founder of Islamic faith, and his name was Prophet Muhammad. Okay, so we have to learn about how the founder came up, how the founder began this faith, how he founded this faith, and how he spread it. Okay, so after learning that, we'll have an idea about the Islamic empire. Okay, about the spread of Islam, about the rulers in this area in Arabia and his expansion out of Arabia. All right. So we'll look at the life of Prophet Muhammad and his life and teachings. Now, Prophet Muhammad, we know, is the founder of Islam, right? He was born in a place in Arabia called Mecca. Okay, so Mecca is one of the famous cities in Arabia. Okay, and the year he was born was 570 AD. All right, he belonged to a prosperous Qurayshi tribe. He came from a tribe whose name was Qurayshi. Now, at that time, Arabian society had a lot of evil, social evils present in it. People practiced, people followed these social evils. Okay, they worshipped. What were these social evils? The worship of idols. Okay, there were idols that people worshipped as gods, and people performed useless and lengthy and extravagant ceremonies. Okay, and people were also very superstitious. All right, they did not reason, they did not think clearly, they were superstitious. All right. So Prophet Muhammad, he was aware of these kind of evil practices that were present in the Arab society. Okay, so he was very much against these practices, and he was determined to free the Arabs from such evils, from such social evils. All right. Now, at the age of 40, Muhammad declared that he was a prophet. Okay, he declared himself a prophet or a messenger of Allah or God, and then he laid the foundation of the religion of religious faith called Islam. Okay, and as he declared that, he also declared that Allah or God that he believed was the only one and only God. There were no other gods. It was only Allah. Okay, and Quran was the holy scripture. Okay, and this scripture was to be for those people who believed in Islam and who believed in Allah. Okay, he was against idol worship, so he condemned idol worship and he strongly preached against it. He told people not to worship idols. Okay, now Prophet Muhammad and his teachings inspired people, large group of people from Arabia. Okay, and these people who were inspired by Muhammad became his devotees, became his followers. Okay, now Muhammad's message, Muhammad's teachings, it affected particularly those people of Mecca who felt deprived of the gains from trade and religion. Okay, so it affected those people, it influenced those people who were not doing so well, or who were not privileged, or who did not have access to proper trade and religion. Okay, so they were the most impacted ones. They were in search of new communal identity because they were scattered. They were not benefiting from the privileges. They did not have access to privileges. So they were in search of belonging to a community. They were in search of a communal identity. Okay, so as they were influenced and inspired by Muhammad's teachings, and as they began to follow and became devotees of Prophet Muhammad, they came together as one community, and this community was called the community of Muslims. The devotees came to be called as Muslims. Okay, now the Muslims were promised salvation or freedom, okay, on the day of judgment, and a share of all resources of the community on earth. So the believers were promised that for believing in Allah, in one and only Allah, on the last day of judgment, okay, there would be a day of judgment where people would be judged on the basis of their deeds, on the basis of how they lived on earth. So on that day of judgment, they would be provided salvation. Okay, and they would also get a share of all the resources of the community on earth. All right. But as some people followed and were inspired by Prophet Muhammad, there were other people who did not like his teachings, what he was teaching, who did not like his messages. So they became bitter enemies. Okay, they became enemies and created troubles for Prophet Muhammad. Okay, so as a result of these enemies, as a result of how some people disliked the teachings and Prophet Muhammad, he was forced to migrate with his followers from Mecca to Medina in 622 AD. Now, this event of movement of the Muslims along with their leader Muhammad from Mecca to Medina is called the Hijrat. And the Islamic era begins from this year. The year of Islam begins from this particular year, the year of the migration. Okay. Now, people in Medina, they had already heard about Prophet Muhammad, so they welcomed him, and he was able to, with the people's help, conquer Mecca from where he had to migrate. Okay. Now, eventually, Prophet Muhammad became successful in converting the whole of Arabia. Okay, the whole of Arabia, people living in the whole of Arabia were successfully converted to Islam. Okay, that Prophet Muhammad did successfully. Prophet Muhammad died in 634 AD, and he died in Mecca. Okay, not in Medina, but he was buried in Medina. All right, within a century after his death, his followers had conquered a large part of the ancient world and converted its people to Islam. Now, just within 100 years of the death of Prophet Muhammad, his followers were able to conquer the surrounding areas or a large part of the world and spread Islam in these areas. Okay. Now, of course, the survival of the religion depended on the survival of the community of believers. If the believers were not present in an area, how can a religion or a faith survive, right? So as long as the believers believe and they continue to put faith in the religion, then the religion survives. Otherwise, it does not. Okay, so in order for the survival of the religion, Prophet Muhammad, Okay, Prophet Muhammad believed, or he realized, that it was necessary to consolidate the followers. It was necessary to unite and bring together all the Muslims so that the religion survives. Okay, so that Islam survives, continue to survives, and so that it cannot be just wiped away with the invasion of the enemies, with the attack of the enemies. Okay. So, in order to protect the Muslim community, in order to retain the survival of the Islamic faith, Prophet Muhammad established political institutions which would consolidate the Muslim community and its religious faith. Okay, so he established governments, all right, within Arabia. So in Medina, the Prophet created a political order from all the sources which gave his followers protection that they needed. So in Medina, he created a political order, and that order was supposed to provide protection to the people, to the followers of Islam. Okay, the Muslim community was converted into a wider community, and it included those who did not believe in just one God. It included people, other religious followers like the Jews. Okay, so as the people were brought together in the political order created by Prophet Muhammad, there were others as well who were not necessarily followers of Islam, or who did not follow or who did not believe that God was one. Okay, so there were Jews also present within that community. So here is a map. You can see that uh, this is Red Sea, all right, and this right here is the island of Arabia, right? So this was the land where Islam, the birth of Islam took place. Okay, so these are the two important cities in Arabia, Medina and Mecca. All right. So from here, the successors of Prophet Muhammad continue to expand the territory, continue to conquer other areas, and spread Islam. All right. Now, apart from the political order being established to provide protection to the followers of Islam, Prophet Muhammad also set some principles, okay, so that people can be together, united together. So these principles were to be followed by all the followers of Prophet Muhammad, or followers of Islam. So let us see what were these principles. Okay, so there were a number of them. Number one was that they were to believe in one God. Okay, there was only one God, and Prophet Muhammad was the prophet or the leader of the Muslim community. Okay, the Muslims, or the followers of Islam, they were to pray 5 times daily, every day 5 times, and those prayers were called namaz. Okay. Number three, they were to give alms or aids to the poor. Okay, the poor needs to be supported. So that was to be done by the Muslims as well. Number four, fasting in the whole month of Ramzan. So in the whole month of Ramzan, the Muslims are to fast, not eat or drink. Okay. Number five, they were to make pilgrimage to Mecca. Okay. Number six, Quran is the sacred book of the Muslims. Okay, so Quran was the holy book. Number seven, they were to not worship idols, and they were to condemn idol worship, infanticide, usury, gambling, drinking of wine, and eating of pork. So usury is lending money with very high interest. So some people who lend money, they lend money to people with very high interest. So that was prohibited. Okay. and the principle of equality was to be emphasized, was to be applied by the Muslims within their community. Okay. Islam was also opposed to caste and class distinctions. So caste and class distinctions were absent. All right, and equality of all Muslims before the law. So that was the final principle on the basis of which Muslims were to live together in a community. So these were the basic essential principles on the basis of which the Muslims were to follow, which Muslims were to practice their faith, and Muslims were to live together as a community. Okay. Now let us look at the polity and economy of Arabia. All right. Now in the beginning, the Arabs assimilated the knowledge of administrative system, the sciences, culture, and civilization of those countries which they conquered. Now initially, as the Arabic rulers, as the Arabs conquered their neighboring areas or the countries or the region, then they assimilated the knowledge that they can get. So knowledge of the political system, the administrative system, science, culture, technology, civilization, etc. Okay, so they were learning from the people that they conquered. Okay. In their administrative system, they employed not only Muslims but as well as non-Muslims. So there were Christians, there were Jews, non-Arabs, there were Zoroastrians, there were Buddhists as well. So there were people belonging to different faiths or practicing different religious faiths who were employed in the administrative system of Arab. Okay. Of Arabia. All right. Although the Abbasids, so Abbasids, you'll know it was one of the empire. Okay, it was one of the dynasties in Arabia. You'll learn about that later. So although the Abbasids, so the dynasty created by Abbasids, they were Orthodox Sunnis. Okay, they belonged to one sect of Islamic faith, but they gave freedom to people who belonged to other religions to express their ideas, to also practice their religious faiths. Okay, but what they did not allow was to preach against Islam. So they were not allowed to preach against Islam. Otherwise, they were free to practice their own respective religions. Okay, the Caliph. So caliphs are the head. They are the ruler or the head. Okay, of the Arabs. Now the Caliph Ma'mun set up a house of wisdom or Bait ul Hikmat for translating into Arabic the literacy works of various civilizations such as Greek, Byzantine, Egyptian, Iranian, and Indian. So some of the rulers of Arab, okay, they also employed scholars, philosophers to bring literary works from Byzantine Empire, from Egypt, from Iran, from India, all right, from Greece, and to be translated into Arabic, okay, for knowledge to be gained by the Arabs, all right. So that kind of translations were also done. The example set by the Caliph, the ruler, was followed by many nobles. So the examples, inspirations provided by these caliphs, they were followed by other nobles or the successors of those caliphs. Okay. In a short period, all important works of the various countries were made available in Arabic. So important works, literary works, which were available in various parts of the world, they were made available in Arabia, which were translated in Arabic. Okay, as a result of the work done by a group of European scholars, we have a good deal of knowledge about the impact of the Greek science and philosophy on the Arabs. So because of these, because of the literatures which were derived from various parts of the world and translated and used by the Arabs, the Arabic culture, the Arabic architecture, the Arabic philosophy, science, they were all influenced by those of Greece, by those of India, by those of Byzantine, by those of Egypt, etc. Okay. Now, they were also influenced by the Chinese knowledge of science and philosophy. Okay, many Chinese inventions such as compass, printing, gunpowder, and barrow wheel were introduced in Europe via Arabs during this period. So the Arabs, they not only gained the knowledge from others, but they applied it. So as they applied these knowledge, they invented. Okay, they invented with the knowledge that they gained from the outside world. They invented technologies, they they advanced their technological developments, etc. Okay, so they invented compass, printing, a press, gunpowder, barrow wheel, etc. All right. The famous Italian traveler Marco Polo went to China in order to know more about this country and to break Arab monopoly of Europe's trade with China. So the Arabs had become very powerful and they had established contact with China. Okay, and had good trade relationships with China. Okay, so a traveler called Marco Polo from Italy went to China in order to know how the Arabs were establishing a contact and were developing flourishing trade relationships with China. Okay, so this shows how the how Arabia was gaining importance and was gaining strength and power in the eastern part of the Byzantine Empire. Okay. The Arabs over time they conquered large area in the world that stretched from Spain to India. So the Arab Empire extended from Spain in the west to India in the east. Such vast area was controlled by the Arabs. Okay, and for the first time in the history of the world, Turkestan, Persia, Arabia, Egypt, North Africa, and Spain were united. It was under the rule of the Arabs that Persia, Arabia, Egypt, North Africa, Spain, Turkestan, they were all united into one particular region. Okay. Now, like I said, caliphs or caliphas, they were the rulers of this Arab empire, the empire of the Arabs. Okay, so the empire was ruled by caliphs or caliphas. Okay, the calipha or caliphs, they were the head of the empire, they were the ruler of the Arab empire. Okay. Now, in the Arab Empire, in the Muslim Empire, it was the Muslim law, okay, that controlled or that looked over the administration, and that Muslim law came from Quran, the holy book of Muslims. Okay, so that from there the Muslim law was drawn, and that was applied to control and rule over the people in the Muslim Empire or the Arab Empire. Okay. Political and religious rules thus were completely merged. So political and religious rules were merged into one. There was no separation between political and religious rules. Okay. Now it was believed that Allah, the God, ruled through the caliphs. So the caliphs who were the ruler of the Arab Empire, they were actually a representative of God. So the God was ruling over the empire through the caliphs. Okay, so the caliphs therefore were divine kings. They had divine rights to rule the people. They were selected by the God to rule over the people, and they enjoyed absolute powers. They were in control and authority of everything within their empire. Okay. But even though they had absolute powers to enjoy, even though they had divine rights, they could not violate the rules laid out by Quran. They could not go against the Quran. Okay, so Quran became a written constitution of the Muslim state. It became a book which laid out all the rules that were followed by all the Muslims, be it the rulers or be it the people who were ruled by the rulers. All right. Now, the interpretation of Quran, how Quran was read and understood and applied to formulate laws to rule the people, that was done by the mullahs, the scholars. Okay. Theoretically despots, the caliphs were unable to assert their rule over the whole territory of the empire. They therefore permitted powerful rivals to set up independent rulership as sultans or governors. The sultans were happy to pay lip service to caliphate over lordship. With the passage of years, the caliphate became an historic shadow. The sultan or governor was the actual ruler of the territory under him. Now, over time, of course, as the empire expanded, as the empire became vast, it was very difficult for the caliphate or the caliph to rule over the vast tract of the empire. So it appointed governors or sultans at various areas, okay, to oversee or to supervise the functioning of those areas. Okay, now these sultans or governors, they acted to please the caliphate or the caliph, okay, or khalifa. All right. And over the period of time, what happened was these governors and these sultans, they became powerful, they became wealthy, and now they began to act like actual ruler of that territory. All right. And the caliph or khalifa weakened in the position of power and authority over time. Okay, the sultans emerged as more powerful and more authoritative. Now let us look at some of the important rulers of the Arab Empire. So the first one that we are going to look at is Abu Bakr. Okay, now Abu Bakr was the first caliph after the death of Prophet Muhammad. Okay, he was the first ruler of the Muslim community. Now, when Abu Bakr became the leader of the Arab Empire, there was confusion among the Muslim community. Okay, confusion regarding the succession to the throne. Okay, tribes all around Arabia broke out in open revolt. Now, some people did not like the fact that Abu Bakr became the new caliph. So they broke out in revolt, in rebellion against the new caliph. Okay. Uh, Now, these tribes, they continued to regard Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad, as the leader, as the head of the followers of Islam, but they refused to see Abu Akbar as caliph, and they refused to pay taxes to him. Okay, but Abu Bakr was successful in crushing the rebellions by the end of 633 AD. Okay, so despite all these internal problems, despite the rising revolts and rebellions, Abu Bakr continued to expand the territory. Abu Bakr continued to rule the Arab Empire and expand its territory. Okay. He sent Muslim forces, he sent troops into Syria, in Iraq from Arabia, and it paved the way to conquest in these areas later. Okay, later the Arab leaders conquered Syria and Iraq. Okay, Abu Bakr died eventually, and before his death, he appointed Umar bin Khattab as his successor, as the next Khalifa or Caliph. Okay. So the next Arab ruler that we are going to look at is Umar. Okay. Now, under Caliph Umar, the early raids blossomed into full-fledged campaigns of conquest. Now, before Umar, okay, Abu Bakr had sent troops, and these were small campaigns or expeditions. But after the coming of Caliph Umar, small campaigns these small campaigns became actual conquests. Okay, they turned into conquest, whereby the areas where the troops were sent earlier, they were captured. All right. So Umar continued to send out his troops and brought within their territory the Arab Bedouin tribes, the other tribes, okay, other Arab tribes which lived outside of the Arab territory then, or Arabia. In 636 AD, the Arabs defeated the Persians at Qadisiyah in the battle, which proved to be decisive. So the Arabs under Caliph Umar, they defeated the Persians as well. Thereafter, the Arabs continued to push back the Persians. They continued to conquer more and more territories of the Persians. The Muslims then quickly conquered northern Iraq. So northern Iraq was also quickly conquered, and they moved to western Persia. So from Arabia, they moved to Persia, and they conquered East Persia, and slowly they moved to West Persia as well. At the Battle of Nihavand in 642 AD, the Persians could no more offer resistance. The Persians could no longer hold the Arabs, and the remaining territory of Persia was left open to conquest. So as a result of that, the Arabs entered into the Persian territory, and they conquered Persia. Okay, the last Sassanid king of Persia fled to Khorasan and was killed there in 651 AD. Okay, as a result of this invasion by the Arabs of Persia, the Persian ruler king had to flee, had to escape to Khorasan, where he died, or where he was killed in 651 AD. Okay. Now, as the Arabs were gaining strength and power, now alongside their empire, there was Byzantine Empire, the East Roman Empire, right? Now, by this time, the East Roman Empire, or the Byzantine Empire, had become quite weak as a result of series of invasions, attacks, and wars. Okay. The subjects, the citizens of Byzantine, was also dissatisfied or unhappy with its emperor because heavy taxes were demanded on them. Heavy taxes were to be paid by the people, and also religious persecution was quite common within the Byzantine Empire. Okay. Now, on the other hand, the Muslim forces were growing. The Arabs were growing, and their raid parties were turning into large-scale armies. Okay, and these armies were formed by recruiting all the tribes from the whole of Arabia. All right. Now, in 636 AD, the Arabs won a decisive victory over the Byzantines. All right, in the ravines of the Yarmouk River, a tributary of Jordan. So in 636 AD, the Byzantine Empire was defeated by the Arabs. All right, the Arabs thus faced little resistance in occupying the remainder of Syria and Palestine. Now, after occupying its area near Jordan, it now went on to occupy remainder of Syria as well as Palestine. After that, the Arab troops now marched to northern Iraq, and then Armenia, and then into Egypt. So it was going all across the eastern and southern part of the Byzantine Empire. Okay, the Byzantines surrendered Egypt to Muslim under a peace treaty of 641 AD, and Egypt was finally taken over from the Byzantine by the Arabs in 641 AD. Okay, so the southern territory, the eastern territory of the Byzantine Empire were taken over by the Arabs. The peace treaties made by Umar allowed the conquered people to retain their lands. Now, as Caliph Umar took over the newly acquired territories, there the people were allowed to keep their lands. They were not taken over by the Caliph, okay? And they were allowed to retain their religions as well. They were allowed to retain whatever religious faiths that they adopt or they had or they practiced, okay? These people who did not belong to the Muslim community, they were given the status of protected people. They were called protected peoples or dhimmi. And because they were protected people, they were to pay a tax, special tax called jizya. Okay. The abandoned lands, the lands that were abandoned, they were confiscated by the ruler to supply income for the treasury. Soldiers and notables such as Prophet Muhammad's relatives were given compensation from the state. Now the soldiers and relatives of Prophet Muhammad, they were favored by the Caliph and they were given compensation by the state or by the ruler. Okay. Now these pensioners were listed in a register. So the compensation receivers, the people who received compensation from the Caliph, they were called pensioners and their names were listed in a register. Okay, they were called Diwan. All right. Umar retained the local administrators but appointed governors to oversee the work. Now, in these newly acquired territories, the local administrators were allowed to function as they did in the earlier, before they were included into the Arab Empire. But governors were appointed by Caliph Umar, to oversee the work of these local administrators. Okay, the soldiers were stationed in garrison towns. They were prevented from interacting with local population and also kept moving. The soldiers were put at important positions, at important locations, at garrison towns. Okay, but they were prohibited from interacting with the locals, and they were also made to move from one place to another quite frequently so that they don't interact with the locals much. Okay. So Caliph Umar started a new era that started from the year of immigration of Prophet Muhammad from Mecca to Medina. So that year was called 1AH, and in Muslim year it was called 1AH, but it was actually 622 AD. So 622 AD, it indicated the first Muslim year. Okay. Caliph Umar was assassinated by a Persian captive in the year 644 AD.